I'm Brad Harrington, the Executive Director of the Boston College Center for Work and Family, and I'm here to talk about our latest report on fatherhood, the new dad, work, and life in progress. Since 2009, the Center has dedicated a lot of our research efforts to exploring the changing roles of fathers in American families. We've done a number of studies. This study in particular summarizes 4 studies that we've done on nearly 2,000 fathers in the U.S. and also in Australia. So our studies over this past 4 years have really been a mix of both quantitative and qualitative work. Most of the fathers that we've talked to have been college educated, part of dual career couples for the most part. They've been in white collar positions and mostly working at large U.S.-based corporations. In our studies, when we've asked fathers how they see the balance of their role between financial providing and emotional caregiving for their children, it's been interesting to find that the majority of fathers really see their primary responsibility as a mix between the two. In fact, nearly 70% of the fathers in our study have said they saw their role as an equal balance between providing for the emotional and physical needs of their children, balanced with their role of providing for their children and their families' financial security. We believe as we see a lot of the fathers' attitudes about breadwinning and caregiving and their role changing, that's the result of really 2 forces. One is obviously the incredibly large increase of working women, especially in professional and managerial positions. That increase has made it necessary for men to take up a greater share of responsibility for caregiving activities. But in addition, in talking to the new dads, we also find that they have a very strong interest in being engaged and active fathers. In fact, when we asked them how they would define a good father, breadwinner came out 4th on a list of 6 possible criteria. Scoring ahead of that were providing love and emotional support to my children, being a good role model, teacher, and mentor, and also being present in my child's life. In our survey, nearly 70% of the fathers said when they were asked, how should caregiving be divided between you and your spouse, 70% said it should be divided equally between my spouse and I. However, when we asked how is caregiving divided, only 1/3 of the fathers said it was divided equally, and 2/3 of the fathers said my spouse does more than I do. Fathers said they spent about 2.6 hours per workday with their children, and 77% said they would like to increase the amount of time they actually spend with their kids. The problem is, in the same survey, 58% of the fathers said they would like to get to a position in senior management with companies, and more than 3/4 of them said they would like a job with greater responsibility than the one they hold currently. So one of the questions we have is, how do those 2 things gel? In our surveys, we found that 76% of fathers spend a week or less off with their newborn child, and 96% spend 2 weeks or less. And in fact, 16% take no time off at all following the birth of their most recent child. In addition to that, virtually none of the fathers that we surveyed changed their work schedule at all. Of the 963 dads in our U.S. study, 962 continued to work on a full-time basis following the birth of their most recent child, and they said that their managers' expectations hadn't changed at all in terms of what they expected from them as a worker. One of the things we did in our 2012 study was focus on at-home dads, and we did a qualitative survey where we did in-depth interviews with fathers who are a part of the new breed of at-home fathers. That's still a very small percent. It's less than 4% of all at-home parents are fathers, but it's increased fairly dramatically. One of the things we found is when we did our larger quantitative study, although the percentage of at-home dads is still relatively small, when they were asked the question, would you consider being a stay-at-home father if your wife earned enough to financially provide for your family, 53% of the fathers said that they would. The attitudes around being an at-home dad have changed significantly in the United States in recent years. One of the things we tried to define with our fathers during our research was what equated to an effective workplace culture. And we really looked at 3 dimensions. One was colleagues and coworkers. How supportive did they seem around the challenges that working fathers face these days. The second was supervisors and managers. Did they seem to be willing to accommodate fathers in trying to balance their work and family responsibilities, and were they supportive and encouraging of the father playing an active role in child rearing? The third was workplace policies. So what kind of policies existed from the Human Resource Department that really provided things like leave or flexible work arrangements or whatever it might be to again support the working dad. And what we saw very clearly was fathers who worked in a workplace culture that they found to be supportive had a much higher level of job satisfaction, were more satisfied in a career sense, so saw themselves staying with the organization through longer periods of time, and had a much lower likelihood of seeking out opportunities to leave the organization. So after doing such extensive research on fathers over the past 4 years, we felt like a part of our agenda this year when we issued our report was to really make the report a call to action. We've certainly surfaced a lot of good findings in the media, and many employers have been interested in what we've talked about, but what's less clear to us is what's been done as a result of the work done over the last 4 years. So what we were interested in with this study was really, what's the call to action? What are the things that need to be done both by fathers and by employers to really advance the case of fatherhood in the workplace? Our goal with all of the work we've done over the last 4 years is to really catalyze a national conversation on this issue of the changing role of fathers. If we can do that by starting with our member organizations, that would be great, but even on a broader societal level, we would like to think that we might be able to in some way impact people's understandings of working dad, people having a more clear and balanced portrait of the way working fathers operate these days, and most importantly, get fathers and organizational leaders involved in a conversation about how work-family impacts all of us, not just working women. So we feel like there's really a bunch of building blocks we're going to put together over the course of the next few months that we hope will really catalyze a national conversation on this issue. One of the building blocks we're going to do is develop a new website that will be called thenewdad.org, which we think is very simple and easy to remember, and will be a place that will be sort of a repository for good articles, good pieces of research, and also videotapes that we think are informative about the changing role of fathers in America. The second thing we'd like to do is to put together some webinars where we will invite not only speakers who are expert researchers, but also executives and line people, and can talk about the stresses and strains that fathers are under. Third thing we're going to do with our member companies especially is offer the opportunity to conduct seminars either on-site or virtually that will also address these issues. In these seminars we would expect to discuss the findings of the research that we've done, but also engage people in structured conversations around how things are going in their own workplace and what things maybe the organization can do to be more in tune with the needs of today's working father.